Hi everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe and well. Welcome back to another series of video. Today, I'm going to show you how to install or configure the Meraki Virtual MX vMX Small in Azure. So let's get started. What I'll be showing you is how to configure Meraki Virtual MX vMX in Azure. Right? So before we begin, it's important that you already have an existing virtual network, right, and a existing virtual subnet, right, in a resource group that is separate from where we are going to create the VMX, right? So it should be the case in most of your demo or even setup. So what I have done is I have set up I have a test environment that I've set up in Azure with a subnet of 10.111.1, right? Class C address and a test machine, right? .5 already in the Hong Kong Azure environment. Now, what I'm going to show you today is how do I do a site-to-site VPN, right, between the MX67W, which I have in Singapore, to the um, Azure, which I will be using for my demo lab, for security testing, malware testing, in future video, right? So this allows us to quickly spin off a instance or environment for me to connect my local environment to the internet. Of course, I will reset up this after the demo just to make sure that I clean up some of the IP address and sensitive information, right? So, and then I have a client that I have set up, which is what you'll be seeing that I'm using for the demo in my Singapore lab environment behind a two-tier firewall. And I'll show you how once after it's set up, I can get access to the test machine in Azure in Hong Kong. Right. So one of the key things I like about Meraki setup, whether be it just a simple site to site or a complex environment, uh, especially when you're looking at SD-WAN and SASE today. The key thing is really Meraki is really simple to deploy, right? Really, really simple. Management is really easy, right? And on top of that, it provides a high level visibility, especially suitable for company who are not that large, right? You don't have a lot of people, don't have a lot of resources. Meraki is definitely the way to go, right? And look at the review, right? Even though cloud provider like Azure, Google, or even AWS have the ability to spin off their own VPN gateway for Bayesian hosts or for site to site. If you have a Meraki environment, or if you're thinking of managing, um, you know, two to maybe a couple of hundreds or even thousands of sites, really, really consider Meraki because it simplifies a lot of the requirement. Now, of course, if you are a large, very, very large organization like the government and the banks, a lot more consideration goes in. But in general, most of the customers out there, Meraki might be sufficient, right? So take a look at that. So in this demo, it's going to be three, very basic stage or steps, right? There are a couple of sub-steps in each of the steps that I've highlighted, but generally there are three basic steps. One is creating the network, two is really generating a token, and then three is really creating the VMX in Azure and applying the tokens and the route table, right? So for step one, I'll show you how to quickly or where do you apply the license. Now you need a license before you can spin off a Meraki vMX in whether is it Azure or AWS, right? Uh, and then next after that, I will show you how to create a network and then add a new VMX small, right, into my Meraki dashboard. Really, really simple, really, really fast, right? And that's one of the key strengths. And then after that, on step 2, like I said, we'll generate a token. Step 3, Azure is never easy, right? It's always complex because it is always enhancing and changing, right? 90% of my demos and troubleshooting when I'm integrating with Azure, it's all about integrating and troubleshooting in Azure, right? And of course, to be fair, I'm not an Azure expert, right? So, it takes me a bit longer to figure out, right? So now without further ado, right, let's hop over to the dashboard. Okay, once you log into the Meraki dashboard, go to network and then click on the drop down menu here, right? So before that, let me quickly, like I mentioned, go to organization and license info, right? This is the place that you apply your license and is the first step that you need to do. Click on license info, right? And then go over to the license and then click on add license. Right, for those of you who are whether doing a trial or or you have purchased a license, you have received an email with the instruction. You just need to paste your license key here, and then that's it, right? You have applied a license to your environment. Now, I already have my license applied, so I'm not going to do that here. So once you have done that, we can go over to network, right, and click on the drop-down menu, and then select create a new network, right? Okay, give it a meaningful name. Okay, for the network type, right, select security appliance. Okay, that is where the VMX falls under. The virtual MX is actually a firewall or in our case, a virtual concentrator, right? We'll keep the configurations as default, right? Over here, you have seen that I have done a lot of tests, and you can see that there are, a couple of appliances that are already added here, right? So, but for you, if you are doing a lab afresh, you won't see any of this appliance here, right? So next, let's click on Create Network. Okay, you see only add VMX access here because my license is only for VMX-S, the small instance. Now, if you have added in the VMX-M, right, you will be able to see that option to add VMX, other VMXs here. Now, do read through the documentation, right, to see what are the supported VMXs in the SaaS platform, right? If I don't recall wrongly, VMX large is not supported in Azure, and there are a couple of variants there, right? So for customers, you need to really look at that in detail. But for lab, we're gonna keep it simple, right? So once that is done, let's click on Add VMXS. Okay, and that is how simple, right, to create a VMX in your Meraki environment. The appliance is being created, right? Imagine it's as easy as adding your Meraki hardware, plug it in, add it in, it's up, right? So that's how simple it is, right? So that is the whole of step 1, right? 3 very simple sub steps, right? So once that is done, let's move over to step 2, right? Which now we'll look at how do we generate the authentication token. Now, the reason why, I put this into one of the step is that now for a lot of you, right, myself included, when I first started with this, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, when I came into this screen, I was looking for a button, right, that I can click to generate the authentication token, right, without reading through the manual. And then I really couldn't find the buttons around here, right? And then that's where I realized that, over here, it looks like a text, right, explanation, but it is actually a clickable hidden button, right? So what you need to do is for step 2, click on the generate authentication token. And that's all it is for step 2. Copy the VMX authentication token. You will need it for the integration of the Azure VMX later. So let's close this and hop over to Azure. Now, if you know what you're doing in Azure, it is not difficult to configure, but it can be difficult to troubleshoot, right? Just because Azure has a wide range of services, right? So what we need to do for step 3 first is really go to create a resource and then type in VMX, right? Select Cisco Meraki vMX and then just review the information that you need, right? In terms of pricing, utilization, and review, for example, and then you can just click on create, right? Select the subscription. I'm going to select pay as you go dev test. It's slightly cheaper depending on how you utilize the plan. And then click on select the resource group, right? I've already created a SASE Hong Kong Meraki MX resource group, so I'm going to use that. You can choose, any other groups that you want, right? Over here is fine, right? Region, okay. Hong Kong is in East Asia under the region. I'm going to select that. I'm going to give it a name. Okay, be mindful of the naming convention. I believe it cannot be longer than 64 characters, and it doesn't take special characters like underscore. I believe dash should be fine. Let's try it out. Okay, uh, this is step 2 where we need to put in the authentication token. Right? Hope you have saved or kept the copy of the token in your clipboard. I'm going to paste that in. So that is where you apply the token, right? Step 2 is done, right? So in terms of zone, availability zones are for larger customers who are looking at HA across various zones. For example, one of the use case, you need to check what are the region that supports availability zone as of the time that I did this video. Availability zone is not available in East Asia. I'm going to select none since for the demo and testing environment, we don't really need that unless, of course, you are preparing for a implementation for a large customer on that. Okay, for the name, so I'm going to give it a meaningful application name. All right. Okay, so for application name is even shorter, right? You can't use be greater than 32, and you can't even have dash, right? Which is fine. Next, click on deploy detail. Okay, remember you need to select an existing virtual network, right? So for lab environment, we're going to keep it simple. Now, if you do anything else other than what is recommended, you will spend a lot of time troubleshooting, right? So this is really, really critical. Okay, I'm going to put important, right, on this part so that you're aware, right? So you need to select a existing network. So in our case, I'm going to select the SASE demo virtual network, right? And then subnet, right? Same thing. This is important again, right? What do you want to do for simple testing setup? You want to select the subnet that you want the VMX to connect to provide the site-to-site VPN, right? You can do a lot more customization and advanced stuff, but for a start, I would recommend choose the subnet that you want connectivity to, right? So in this case, if you remember my diagram, which I'll show you in a bit, I have a test environment already set up under the 10.111 subnet, right? So I'm going to select that and let's take a look at the diagram that I have, right? So if you remember, this is the subnet I'm connecting to. Okay, this is the subnet I'm connecting to, right? And this is the virtual machine, my test machine. Then I'm going to show you the connectivity after we finish configuring the MX or the virtual MX. Okay, next for VM size, right? They already predefined a standard size for you, right, for production environment. But for lab, to save on cost, even though I don't keep this on all the time, they still charge for the size, storage, and etc. So what I'm going to do is to go for a lower tier so that I save some costs in the lab environment. Click on select, right? So I've selected D2 V2 versus the F series, right? We'll not cover what's the difference. There are a lot of YouTube video that you can look at. Next, you'll do a quick validation. Once it's done, you will see that this is a managed app from the marketplace offering. It's very common that you will see this co-admin access permission. We're not going to touch on that today. So I'm going to agree on that and then do a quick review of my configuration and then click create. It takes a bit of time, right, for the deployment to complete. So I'm going to fast forward this portion in a bit. Okay, looks like completed the deployment, no error, nice. Let's go to the resource, right? You realize that a managed resource group is being created, right? So effectively, that's all you need to do to spin off a VMX instance in Azure. Okay, next, what we need to do is to create a route table. So let's go back to resource and search for route table, right? Click on route table, select create, choose the same plan, right? If you are doing a lot of demos and lab on Azure, you'll take a while, but you need to figure out the cost, right? It can become quite a lot if you forget to turn off your machines, right? So let's go over and select the resource group, right, which is the SASE Hong Kong Meraki vMX group. Right, let's go to East Asia. Okay, let's give it a name. Next route table. Okay, you can choose to propagate the gateway routes or not do it, right? So from my lab test, it doesn't really make too much of a difference since it's a very straightforward environment. But based on the documentation, they actually do tell you to turn it off, right? But for demo, I'm going to keep it on, right? And then click on tab, right? So I'm going to use a name, right, so that I can easily recognize, right? So some of these nuances are really Azure related. You'll figure that out. What do you use with the tag? And if you go into Azure command line, some of these things really does help, right? If not, you will have to have a good amount of documentation um, to troubleshoot, especially, right? Next, let's review and create. You will go through a very quick validation, and then once it's done, just click on create. Okay, this is a very fast one. Next, click on go to resource. First thing we want to do is let's go and create a route, right? Once you select routes, then click on add, right? Give it a route name, really for site to site. From Hong Kong, VMX S to does support hyphen and underscore, good, to SG MX67 routes, right? Okay, if you remember, my testing network is 23.0, right? Class C. Put that in 19168.23.0/24, which is Class C. Okay, this is the other important thing, right? If you don't read through the manual like I did when I first tried to spin off a couple of virtual instances, you'll hit into trouble, right? So you need to change this next hop type to a virtual appliance, right? So click on that. The next hop address is the VMX address. Now, this is important. If you're an expired CCNP like me, right, this can become quite a challenge after a while, right? Next hop address. Why not gateway address? What does it mean? Does it mean my MX67 in Singapore? So, it raised a lot of questions. And when you read on this, it will tell you the next hop type is virtual appliance, right? So what do I do, right? So not to worry, right? Let's hop over back to the MX. Oops. Now you can see that on the VMX, you will see that now the WAN IP address is active, right? And then you will see that the port is green, right? Which means that it's connected. Next, what we want to go and check is the uplink, right? The uplink is the fastest place. I will get the IP address. So you can see that my IP address of my VMX is 10.111.1.5, right? And you need this because the next hop address is the VMX address, right? So you might get confused, right? Let's go back and make sure that you don't, right? So it's not the gateway, right? Even though I have spin off a couple of instances, I keep forgetting that it is the IP address of the VMX, not the gateway. The documentation does tell you, right? If you read through it thoroughly. Okay, so once that is done, right? Do not worry about IP forwarding because by default, IP forwarding is enabled on the virtual appliance. So for those of you who have been playing around with the virtual cloud, you will realize that, especially in Azure, for any network virtualized router, MVR, MVA, you will need to turn on IP forwarding, right, to be able to forward IP routes. Okay, click on OK, and it's pretty fast, couple of seconds to create a route. Usually it's quite fast. Okay, let's do and there you go, it's done, right? Next thing after the route is the subnet, right? From the same tab, click on subnet, and then click on associate subnet. Right, for a lab environment, very simple, right? I'm going to go to the subnet, select my SASE demo virtual network, and select the Hong Kong server, right, which is the subnet where my client and server and test machine is going to be. Click on that and click OK. Okay, while we're doing that, right, I've already have my client machine in .111.1.4, right? As you can see, right now I'm unable to ping my workstation in or the test machine in the Hong Kong Azure, right? So right. So now the subnet is added. Okay, we have finished the configuration on Azure. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is to go back to the Meraki vMX, go to security, right? What I want to show you is right now. Okay, actually, let's go to the VPN status first. You will notice that the VPN tunnel is up between my Singapore office, right, and the Hong Kong environment, right? Connectivity is fine, right? We are seeing traffic coming in, and latency is amazingly good, right? I don't know how uh, Cisco managed to do it, right? But if you were to do a basic latency test, uh, you generally don't hit below 30, right? So that's another plus point for the Meraki MX. Okay, now let's go over to the last step, which is site-to-site VPN. Okay, over here you can choose the various mode, right? So for this, I'm going to just allow my Singapore office to get established because I do have other sites that is connected to my main site, right? My test site, right? So to reduce traffic and to not have any kind of routes you know, degradation, right? I'm going to keep this purely between my home lab as well as my Hong Kong cloud lab. So I'm going to add a hub. I'm going to select my Singapore MX, right? And then what I'm going to do is to add the Hong Kong SSC demo subnet. Okay, dash, right? The naming convention is not 100% consistent, but you know, I'm going to redo this anyway, right? After this. So yeah, but for demo purpose, I can keep it. Right. So this is the Hong Kong subnet that we need to have, right? If we go back to my, okay, so the Hong Kong subnet is this, right? Okay, 0 class C, right, /24, add a network and save. In very, very rare situation where you can't save, and it is not so rare, right? And the reason is because I've been doing so many configuration on my browser that, you know, I think the cache is, you know, causing some issue. Not to worry, right? It's a very common problem. Unfortunately, I think I need to do a DNS flush, which I do not want to do right now. I am going to spin off another connection from my host computer. All right. As a good citizen, I'm going to log out. Okay, and close this. Okay, now we are back. Again, everything looks good, hunky-dory. Let's go over to site VPN again. Okay, I'm going to do spoke at the hub. Okay, and then at the network, Hong Kong, let's see, demo subnet, right? Then dot 111.1.0 class C/24. Okay, and then save. As you can see, right? Changes, save. Okay, so now we have completed the entire setup, right? End to end. The only step that I did not mention is configuring the site-to-site VPN on Meraki MX or the VMX. I thought of doing it as a separate video, but I mean, a couple of lines, I don't think, you know, we will need a separate video for that. Okay, now that we are done, let's go back to my Singapore virtual host machine. Okay, now let's hop over again to the command prompt and let's try and first ping my VMX. And it is not working. Oh, there you go. It is up and running. And then let's ping my Hong Kong machine. It's not up and running. Let's try and ping again. And I know the reason. It seems that my client blocks ping, right? But you can see that, you know, now I can connect to my Hong Kong machine, right? Okay, yes, and then voila, we're in, right? So if you do an IP config, you'll see that although the default gateway is still .10.11 right, it's actually routing all my 192 traffic to .1.5, right? Thanks to the route table that we have created. So that's all, right? It's a very simple step-by-step guide to quickly spin off a demo lab, right? So especially for the customers like yourself who wants to try it out in your lab environment, or for partners and distributors who are doing trying to set up your own test environment, this is actually a very quick and fast way to configure and show, right? How fast and easy that Meraki is in helping client manage multiple sites. Now, one or two sites is fine, right? But when your sites gets massive, right, and that's where all this simple configuration helps, right? We have a lot more information that Meraki can provide. As you can look at as you have seen the dashboard earlier on, right? Okay, let's disconnect from my connection. So if you remember the Meraki environment, you can see that it's very easy to configure, right? I have a couple of circuits that is connected, right? I'm using Spoke. I can change it to hub and mesh. Routing is really easy, and you can do a lot more with this. And that's all for today's video, right? It went longer than I expected. So thank you very much. Stay safe and take care. Bye.